I've just done a ton of research and I've come to the conclusion our phones are really screwing up our social lives. I'm Dr. Thomas Smithyman, I'm a clinical psychologist. In this video, I'm going to show you exactly what I've found, how our phones are causing these problems, and then the little changes that we can make to really improve our social lives. We're used to thinking of phones as tools, but I find it more useful to think of our phones as selfish little friends that we take around with us everywhere. What I found in my research is that our phones are using a bunch of tricks that get in the way of our ability to socially connect. The first one of these is probably the most dangerous trick that our phones play on us, and the one that's most likely to kind of actually ruin our lives. We know from research that social connection is a fundamental human need, and it's one of the very strongest drivers of happiness and having a good life. And yet, our phone tries to convince us to spend as much time alone as possible. Like a selfish little friend, this phone wants our attention all the time. It doesn't want us to engage with other people. Our phone wants us just absorbed into it, right? And yet if you ask people about the most meaningful parts of their lives, they don't tend to bring up the phone. We don't talk about, oh, I saw this amazing video, or I had this incredible TikTok scrolling session the other day. People talk about relationships, talk about other people. Those are the things that really matter to us. So from decades of psychological research, we know the factors that drive life satisfaction. And it's not wasting time and endlessly scrolling on our phones. What that does is it takes away from the other parts of our lives. So we know again from research, we have a limited amount of attention. And if we spend it in one area, we have to take it away from other areas. And this is what phones do. They fill up our time with distractions and kind of mindless entertainment, but then they leave us less time and mental energy to focus into things that really matter to us. Like literally last night, I was talking to somebody who told me that every evening, he tends to focus on a couple of hours of phone time. Yet he also told me the same session that he's been meaning to reach out and reconnect with old friends for 6 months but hasn't done it because he can't find the time. Our phones are pulling us in for immediate, shallow comfort, distraction, entertainment. But we know from research that we are far less happy when we are alone than when we're with other people. Maybe you're thinking, hey, I'm doing fine, I'm socializing on my phone. Unfortunately, this is a trap that's going to leave you and the people you interact with unfulfilled. I think most of us are getting this idea now that social media affects us badly. Social media, it's not really social a lot of the time. If we are scrolling through videos or reading posts, we're not socializing. Really, it's more similar to sitting at a coffee shop eavesdropping on someone's conversation or peeping through windows to see what people are doing inside their homes. While it may feel a little bit like socializing, it's not going to meet your fundamental needs. So your phone might be telling you, hey, what about texting and other online communication platforms? Like, I get it, great. They allow you to take time to craft what you're going to say. There's less pressure. You can respond when it's convenient. But really, ask yourself, how fulfilling is that kind of social connection? Like if you think about a text thread you've had where you were discussing funny things, making jokes, how does that feel compared to when you're actually out with friends, laughing and telling funny stories? There's a difference, right? So here's what the research says. These kind of text communications are better than being alone, but they're way less good than actually being in person, being in real life with people. The problem is that texting isn't effectively designed for real connection or deeper connection. It's just not possible. All we have is text. Messages come in at random times and we respond in random times. It's asynchronous. Imagine what this would be like in real life. You say something to me and then I just kind of freeze and do nothing, and you're like looking at me, waiting for me to respond. After a while, you're like, okay, guess I'll wander off and do something else, and then occasionally you have to like check back and see it. Have I responded yet? That's a terrible way to actually connect with people or have a conversation. In fact, there's some research that says in real life that synchrony that we get into together is part of why it feels so good to us. Also, that asynchronous texting conversation, like it takes a long time. Like it's kind of annoying, honestly. Like I had a pretty long conversation a few weeks ago and we're getting into an important topic and it took like 90 minutes And when I looked back over the conversation, I realized we could have had that conversation in about 10 minutes. And it would have been a lot more effective and deeper. And we would have had that natural synchrony and emotional connection. Which, that gets us to the next problem here. With text, we are skipping out really, really important channels of communication. All we have are words. But as humans, we learn so much, especially from the voice, from voice cadence, from voice tone. The research tells us we get a lot out of that. Text alone doesn't have it. Not having that voice tone and that cadence, it gets in the way of our ability to empathize. We can't actually tell what someone is thinking and feeling through words alone. We need that voice, that non-verbal communication. And I was again having a conversation with someone else literally last night who talked about how difficult it was having a conversation with a friend and not knowing the emotional context of what they were saying. The same sentence could be seen as angry or sad or maybe a bit of a joke. We can't tell. No wonder we know that the rates of miscommunication and conflict are so high when it comes to just text. So maybe you're getting the sense, yeah, that feels right. I think I do need to actually go out and interact with people in real life. And that's when your phone says, awesome, take me with you, I'm gonna help. And that is such a lie. Your phone's actually gonna sabotage the odds of you meeting anybody and make it harder to connect when you do. So let me illustrate with a story. Some researchers recently put two people into a room together for 10 minutes to see if they would interact. And what they found is that if they allowed people to go in with their phones, they were 5 times more likely not to talk to each other at all. And if they did talk, they were 30% less likely to smile, especially real smiles. They're called Duchenne smiles, where we smile with the muscles up here. So having the phones made people less likely to interact and to be less sociable. Smiles are the basic indicator of safety and the basic way that we connect. Like, that's just a 10-minute experiment. Let's play this out over the course of 6 months. Imagine you don't have your phone or you don't get your phone out. That means you're 5 times more likely to talk to people. You're way more likely to smile. You're more available. There's a whole series of studies showing that when we have our phones out, we are just less socially available. Happens for 2 reasons. One is we're distracted, our phones are distracting, and so we're not engaged with the world, we're not present, we're in our phones. So we aren't available to connect with people. And we also send a signal of, stay away from me, I don't want to talk to you. Especially if you've got headphones in or on our phone, we're telling people don't talk to us, we're not available. And this comes out in the studies too. If someone pulls out a phone, guess what? It makes other people pull out their phones too. Taking our phones around with us makes us less social and less socially available, so we're less likely to meet people. If we have this attention-hogging little friend with us, he dominates our attention, and he robs us of the desire and the opportunity to connect. But what about when it comes to our close relationships, the people that we really care about, that really drive our happiness? By now, you probably will not be surprised to learn that our annoying phones are going to sabotage us here too, and in ways that are subtle and we kind of vastly underestimate. They had a study where they looked at people socializing while they had their phones with them versus not, and they found that when people had phones, they reported they enjoyed themselves less. They had a worse mood, they were more distracted, and they felt less socially connected. Let's imagine this, right? You're in real life and you're talking with somebody, and then they get a buzz from their little friend in their pocket. And all of a sudden, they're like mentally gone. This is literally probably every interaction we ever have in the modern world. But I find it's helpful again. Imagine the phone's a real person. So imagine you are having a conversation with me. And then all of a sudden, someone comes up and they're like, hey, 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 hey. You're probably like, well, I'm having a conversation here. It's like, hey, I got to tell you, Uber's got a deal on cupcakes. I'll be like, that's not important. Like, why are you, I'm having an actual conversation here and really connecting, and you're interrupting me with some nonsense that doesn't matter. That is so unimportant compared to the actual connection that I'm currently having here. You might be used to this. You may find that every time you get a buzz or you feel like, oh, what's my friend up to right now? You're used to getting your phone out. Or when you talk to people, maybe they are constantly getting their phones out. We're used to it, but that doesn't mean it's not having an impact. It still is. And again, if we think about it in a real life context, what's happening, and this comes up in the research too, is if I'm having a conversation with you and then you suddenly disconnect to get your phone out, it's actually a double rejection. You have cut off the connection we're having, which is rejecting, but you've also gone into a silent, whispering communication with someone else that I'm not invited to. I'm being left out. And that feels bad. It's no surprise when you actually measure this with people, they feel a bit ostracized. They've been snubbed. And in the research, it's called Phubbing, phone snubbing. And it is painful for people. People don't like it. And it makes them think worse of us too. And it's hard because we're all doing it. In the research that shows up too, people are like, people are phubbing me, I don't like it, and I'm also doing it to them, and I don't like that. We don't like it. So from the research, we know that even these little mini phone interruptions cause disconnection. They lead to an increase in conflict. People feel lonelier. But I think also really importantly, it prevents us having the type of conversations and connections that really matter. It stops us from getting deep. This comes up again and again in the research. When phones are involved, we have shallower conversations. It makes sense. We can't get into depth if our attention is being pulled away. So the bad news is that phone-driven social disconnection is rampant in the modern world. The good news is that because this is affecting everyone, if you are able to shift in how you connect with people, it's going to be really valuable and really appreciated. Basically, this is an area where it's not hard to be doing better than most people. So to understand how to do this, in general, right, if we think about on one end of a scale, you were sitting alone in your room playing games on your phone. You were totally alone and there's no social connection at all. That is worst case. The other end of the scale, you are in real life fully connected with people. In general, can you get yourself up that scale more often? Can you be more present where you're having what humans in the past would recognize as actual conversations? That's maybe a good way to think about it. You want your ancestors to recognize that you are socially connecting. There's a quote from Robin Dunbar, who's the author of The Social Brain, that said something along the lines of, you need to see the whites of someone's eyes occasionally. And that sticks with me. See the whites of people's eyes. Not all the time, but sometimes. So I think that the key to this, it comes out in a lot of different pieces of research. If you think about charisma, right? Charisma sometimes will be talked about as someone who makes you feel like you're the only person in the room because the attention is fully on you. And then there's this research into attentive listening versus inattentive listening. And with attentive listening, you are fully present. And your attention, which is a flashlight, is fully focused on the person you're talking to. That feels really good to us on a deep level. And it's been shown that attentive listeners perform much better at work and as friends and in dating. So this is what you're aiming for. As much as you can, give attention, pay attention, be fully present. And that'll allow you to make the other person feel really good. You will feel good as well. And you'll have deeper, better conversations and connections.